tackle big issues when we're relentlessly focused on the future. To the folks, to everybody that's dead set on sending us backwards, well, they're about to find out. My name's Isaiah Martin, and I'm running to become the next Gen Z member of the United States Congress, because democracy is only guaranteed if we fight for it.
You know, I saw the news that Secretary Powell passed away, and honestly, I just gotta say, rest in peace to a true American hero. He's always somebody who stood up for what he believed was right no matter what. We gotta do better. We need more people like Colin Powell as time goes on. So rest in peace to Secretary Powell, a true American hero.
Hello everyone, once again from the Tory capitalist dystopia of the United Kingdom, and sadly for the UK and the US, it appears we are going to remain a capitalist dystopia because the new crop of politicians don't really seem to be breaking the mold all too much. And I'm talking about the new Gen Z politicians of the United States and the UK. And because this guy called Isaiah Martin recently announced his campaign for Congress from Texas, and people quickly finding out that maybe this guy isn't as left-wing as he's trying to, present himself, I just wanted to talk about, why so many Gen Z politicians are so disappointing. Because we had, this millennial wave, we had, your AOCs who got elected in their late 20s, and it all looked like it was going to be good for the future. But then even with someone like AOC, who is very progressive in many ways, even she's been a bit of a disappointment. But what we saw with these younger politicians is oh my god, someone who's going to actually challenge the system, someone who's going to make the system better, someone who is not going to basically step in line with the mainstream Democratic Party, which, to be fair to her, she didn't do so much when they were in opposition. But since Joe Biden has become president, most of the squad have done this, bar some examples of voting against things to do with Israel. But even then with AOC, she voted present on Iron Dome funding. Jamal Bowman voted for Iron Dome funding. So it appears the millennial politicians have been disappointing too. And now it looks like a lot of Gen Z politicians are also going to be bad. Now, I will say this is mainly because we've had the first two Gen Z politicians, I believe, in UK and US politics. We had Maxwell Frost, and we have this guy called Keir Mather, I think, in the UK, who's 25. So that's why it's relevant. But both these guys are disappointing in their own ways. But we do have a lot of great young MPs who are either my age or a bit older. People who fall between Gen Z and millennial, like myself. I'm born in 1995. Gen Z, I think, is 1997. So I am technically a millennial, even though so many millennials are so much older than me and feel like they're from a completely different generation. And although I relate to a lot of people of Gen Z, you then have the younger members of Gen Z, and I'm well, I'm not the same as them either. So it's a weird place to be. You know how people say they're politically homeless? It's like being generationally homeless or something like that. But yeah, today I just wanted to give my thoughts about why these Gen Z politicians are looking to be disappointments as well, and how it says so much about our system that to even enter the halls of power in the hopes that you will change something, you basically have to become like everybody else, and then you don't change anything. You just become another cog in a system of neoliberalism where nothing really gets better. Even if you have a party in power who are the lesser of two evils, doesn't seem to make a difference really. The United States being a great example, but also the UK over the last 30 or so years. But before we go any further, please like the video, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Also follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter, on Instagram, on Threads, on Blue Sky. Consider becoming a patron. Benefits include getting access to the Discord server and giving me a message when you've signed up and I'll send you your code. And also access to my Nintendo Switch friend code and older exclusive content on the Patreon. And check out my subreddit and check out my second channel down in the description. So before we go into all of these political candidates and Gen Z politicians, I just wanted to talk about myself from the perspective of someone who was born in 1995 and did at one time actually want to enter electoral politics. I like the idea of being an MP and thought if I could become an MP, I could maybe change things for the better. And I was inspired in part by people like Jeremy Corbyn, who were really going against the grain, and wasn't that great to have a Labour leader who actually shared a lot of my politics, a politician who is not only an MP, but is the leader of the opposition, has really, really good politics, and I agree with them. But what happened, obviously, was after 2017, they saw that Corbyn was a legit threat because he could have won that election. So the whole establishment rallied round, basically trying to absolutely destroy him, including other members of the Labour Party who now run the Labour Party. And then in 2019, he suffered a massive defeat. I don't think people outside the UK really appreciate the smear campaign that was done by literally everyone against Corbyn. The whole press, it was a massive hatchet job calling him a Stalinist, anti-Semite, racist, all this stuff, right? People celebrating Boris Johnson winning as some sort of anti-racist victory for the UK. Like, absolutely laughable. And I think that really crushed my both desire to ever enter electoral politics and also my belief that things can actually change, because Jeremy Corbyn was a threat to this system, and although I'm not naive enough to believe that if he became the Prime Minister, things would immediately change overnight and we'd get all these wonderful socialist policies, at the same time, even him managing a capitalist economy was a big enough threat to the establishment. They had to pull everything out to destroy this guy, right? And publicly, I've been far more inflammatory and radical than Jeremy Corbyn. So if I ran in any election, I'd be destroyed by the press straight away as some sort of extremist, right? So there is literally no hope for someone like me to enter the halls of power and become an elected MP. It just wouldn't happen, right? Because of my personal politics, because of even things I've said on this YouTube channel. You just have Daily Mail and Sun articles run against me saying, look at what the Kavernacle said about the British royal family. Look what he said about the Queen. Look what he said about Israel. Look what he said about Keir Starmer or the Conservative Party. They would literally annihilate me straight away. But at the same time, lots of people still have delusions of grandeur, and lots of people want to enter the halls of power as like some sort of power thing, celebrity, legacy. And I think in America specifically, they know becoming a politician means becoming a celebrity because of the media landscape in the United States. Like, AOC is both a politician, but she's also a celebrity. And that is very appealing to a lot of young people, especially like my generation, Gen Z generation. Like, what is a good way to become famous? Well, you can become a politician and you can enjoy the benefits of fame, but at the same time, you don't have to radically change the system. You can pay lip service, of course. You can say the right things, like AOC, but the impact she looked like she might have had on politics and inspiring other people just like her to challenge the Democratic Party internally seems to have just, washed away at this point, because that's what the system does. And now people realise, well, to enter the system, you have to play ball with certain things. And in the context of the US, that is basically, if you are a Democrat, you must support Israeli apartheid. And that is what has been happening. And that is what's also happening with this newest candidate. But this gets even funnier because this guy is just like complete trash. Like, it's not just the Israel stuff, although that's bad. It's like all his history. And what I'm talking about, this guy just seems like someone who wants to become a politician for the fame and for the benefits it brings. He doesn't actually care about anything to do with politics, really. He sees it as the best way to get famous. Like, I'm pretty sure that's why he's running. The other two examples are a bit different, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So I'll just play you this guy's campaign announcement video, and he writes, "My name is Isaiah Martin, and I'm running to become the next Gen Z member of the United States Congress, because democracy is only guaranteed if we fight for it." So you guys are probably thinking, Gen Z, you're growing up in a late-stage capitalist hellscape of the United States. You're watching your planet burn around you, and you think that's pretty radicalizing. But let's get a sense of who this guy is.
We used to take the word democracy for granted. You see, when I grew up, my parents used to take me to vote with them every single time there was an election. You see, back then, you probably would have seen me wearing some light-up tennis shoes, wearing the same little I voted sticker that the clerk would give me. Shoot, I'd wear it all day, peel it off, stick it on a new shirt, and wear it to school the next day. You would have thought in all of these years that voting would have gotten easier, not harder. But unfortunately, I'm standing right here at ground zero of voter suppression. You see, right here in Texas, Greg Abbott and his allies have created laws that have taken polling places away from line cooks working the night shift. They've thrown out mail-in ballots from seniors who can't drive, and they've empowered the state to have the ability to overturn election results. You see, when I was in college, I led the way for our football stadium to be used as a polling site. And just this past year, they introduced a bill to ban polling sites from college campuses. So, trust me when I tell you, The attack on democracy is real. And I don't want you to think for a second that this is just a Texas thing. Because what we're seeing right here in Texas is just a snapshot of what's going on all across the nation when extremists with no vision try to hold onto power with division. Now more than ever, we need the federal government. I want you to know whether it's strengthening voting rights, protecting our kids from mass shootings, or empowering people on when, if, and how they become a parent, we can tackle big issues when we're relentlessly focused on the future. To the folks, to everybody that's dead set on sending us backwards, well, they're about to find out. My name's Isaiah Martin, and I'm running to become the next Gen Z member of the United States Congress, because democracy is only guaranteed if we fight for it.
So, I got no real problem with the campaign ad. Gen Z guy saying Texas is waging a war on democracy, and he's right in that aspect. So, it seems like, just your typical Gen Z progressive guy. Be a nice, refreshing change in Congress, young guy, hopefully some new ideas. But as we're going to see, this pretty cookie cutter Gen Z political campaign ad is probably hiding stuff a bit worse. So Aaron from Queens has made this really good thread, and they've probably updated it even more since then. But they write, after Isaiah Martin launched his campaign today, it's quickly become clear that he's a centrist Zionist with potential Republican sympathies. I'm going to keep a thread with all the evidence below and keep it updated. So this is a great one to start. Confirmed, as recently as 2020, Democratic congressional candidate Isaiah Martin was hanging out with Greg Abbott at a rally for a Harlan Crow-backed Republican. This is at a rally for GOP candidate Angelica for Texas, who took tens of thousands from Clarence Thomas's fave billionaire Harlan Crow. So according to his LinkedIn, along with Mark Cuban, one of Isaiah's interests is Republican and brief Trump press secretary Anthony Scaramucci. To be honest, I don't think that's particularly bad. Scaramucci is he's basically a meme, so I don't use that against him too much, but there is worse stuff coming. So also according to LinkedIn, Isaiah worked as tough on crime Houston DA Kim Ogg's assistant campaign manager from 2021 to 2022 after she had just defeated a challenger to her left. Ogg has tried to kick a socialist judge off the bench and continues to support the death penalty, so there it is on the LinkedIn. His Twitter likes include transphobe Keir Starmer and AIPAC, among others. So here you see his tweets liking stuff about Keir Starmer trying to retake Scotland for Labour. Another one about, AIPAC retweeting Nina Turner, talking about her losing because they dumped a bunch of money into the opposition campaign against her. He also posted on TikTok saying we need more Colin Powells after he passed away, obviously one of the architects of the Iraq War.
I saw the news that Secretary Powell passed away, and honestly, I just gotta say, rest in peace to a true American hero. He's always somebody who stood up for what he believed was right no matter what.
And this is pretty damning. Then there's his campaign website, which initially included a platform, but which has been completely deleted after intense criticism. On his website, again, he deleted this page. Recognizing Israel as America's legitimate democratic ally, the State of Israel is one of America's longest allies and a genuine democratic partner in the Middle East. On behalf of the constituents in the 18th Congressional District, I will vote proudly to co-sponsor and vote for HRES 92 to voice Congress's position for Israel. And it's just always amazing to me how absolutely cucked American politicians on both sides of the aisle are by Israel. Some random seat in Texas, one of your campaign promises is to back Israel. And it's insane because you have Christian Zionists, you have Jewish Zionists, you have just general American Zionists who don't have any affiliation through religion at all, who support Israel. But again, absolutely amazing. It's something all these guys seem to have in common. And you don't need to support Israel to get elected. And it feels like, isn't this the perfect opportunity as a generation to now say that we're no longer going to have supporting actual apartheid as something that is a deal breaker for getting people's votes? We're just going to say, no, we're not going to support this anymore. And people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, obviously won their own elections, always being proudly against the occupation and stuff. So it can happen. But if you're already Republican leaning as well, pictures with Republican politicians, and putting this in your campaign agenda and then deleting it, I don't think it's a good sign. He also had stuff about keeping private health insurance, which implied his opposition to Medicare for all. Didn't talk at all about LGBT rights or the climate crisis in his campaign notes either. Like, literally, you've got to talk about backing Israel, but not how climate change is affecting places like Texas. Like, that's not more important. Backing some country thousands of miles away to continue a brutal occupation, that's more important than protecting LGBT people or dealing with a climate crisis. So this might have been updated, but no confirmed source or date yet. But along with posing for photos with Greg Abbott, Democratic congressional candidate Isaiah Martin also appears to have posed for photos with Ted Cruz. Face of it, because he's young and saying some of the right things about the attacks on democracy, you're like, oh yeah, refreshing voice for Congress, the younger generation. But oh no, someone who had a hedge fund, gotten photos of Ted Cruz and Greg Abbott, despite all the terrible things they've been doing, cares more about supporting Israel than deterring climate change or supporting the LGBT community under attack in Texas itself, right? Again, nothing's going to change. Another carbon copy centrist Democrat who might actually win on this platform because he'll get the full backing of the party. But again, another Gen Z person running for Congress and another person who looks to be a disappointment. Feels like out of any generation, Gen Z should realize they have the least prospects and should be the most radicalized at having a more like transformative agenda. Here we have something that sounds like the re-election campaign for like an 80-year-old Democratic congressman. And it's just like very disappointing. And in my opinion, this guy just wants clout. He just wants fame. He doesn't stand for anything, right? He just wants to become a congressperson because he knows that will make him famous. And that's why he's saying stuff like, oh, I'll support Israel and health insurance because I know that won't be controversial to anyone. That won't be controversial inside the Democratic Party, who I'm going to rely on for my election campaign. If I started saying we need to stop supporting Israel and we should push for universal healthcare, probably not going to get much support from the mainstream Democratic Party. So again, that's just the newest example, who someone you'd hope, because they're in a certain generation, would have better politics, but sadly, this is not the case. Now, here's another person I want to talk about, and I wouldn't even put them in the same category, so don't worry about that, but Maxwell Frost was the first Gen Z congressman, and he is like way more progressive in like the AOC mold, right? And he supports like the progressive things, he supports like Medicare for all, he supports like pretty much everything, Green New Deal, if you think of just AOC type progressive, that's what this guy is like as well. So in that way, for an elected politician, he's not like a massive disappointment, but again, cucked by Israel. But what's worse is that, unlike Isaiah, who seems to just be doing it to try and get elected, this guy knows better because he actually worked with Palestinians to get his campaign going, and they all say he does know better on the issue of Israel and Palestine, but just said all this stuff to basically get elected. So again, very disappointing that you think the bare minimum to be like a good progressive or leftist in Congress would be, yeah, I won't support apartheid, but apparently that's too much. And it's a common thing. You have progressive except for Israel. Like, it's a common like phrase you hear a lot. And just an article by Mitchell Plitnick. Maxwell Frost abandoned Palestine on his way to democratic victory. Frost's position paper is a standard take on the democratic support for Israel. It supports unconditional military aid to Israel, calls BDS problematic and anti-peace, demonizes Iran, praises the Abraham Accords, which is pretty insane since Donald Trump did that. Frost's paper supports a two-state solution in theory, but opposes any pressures on Israel to get there, just as the democratic allies of AIPAC do. Frost's paper reflects those views in more subtle ways as well. The small section on Palestinian rights is qualified on every level. Here's how it starts. Our commitment to Israeli security must run parallel to our commitment to ensuring the dignity and humanity of Palestinian people. While I advocate strongly for continued aid to Israel, I will do the same for robust US assistance that benefits the Palestinian people and is in compliance with the Taylor Force Act. The entirety of Palestinian rights is dependent on Israeli security, even to the extent of noting that aid must comply with the Taylor Force Act, which essentially bars aid to Palestine until it stops supporting families of those in Israeli prison for violence against Israelis. In practice, Frost's paper supports emergency humanitarian aid to Palestine and little else. His bottom line of basic human rights and dignity for Palestinians does not speak to Palestinian national or civil rights. So making the matter even more distressing, Frost had, early in his campaign, worked very closely with Palestine advocates in Florida. Rasha Mubarak, an organizer in Florida and president of Unbought Power, a political consulting firm, told Mondoweiss, basically Maxwell Frost was a friend who approached me about running for office. And I said I will help in all of my different capacities, and all I ask is that he continue to support Palestinian liberation. He signed a Palestinian feminist collective pledge. He was part of our Palestine organizing network. He was part of organizing at Florida Palestine Network. But on Monday, the Florida Palestine Network issued an angry statement about Frost's betrayal of the group after Palestinian and pro-Palestinian organizations assisted in building, funding, and powering his campaign. Maxwell Frost has already violated his commitment to protecting and fighting for human rights for all. To use FPN's organizing success as a stepping stool and become anti-Palestinian is disturbing, unacceptable. Supporting imperialism and settler colonialism will never equate to a win for the people conscious of human rights. Last year, Frost tweeted his support for FPN's event commemorating Nakba 73, tweeting, "Orlando, the time is now to show solidarity with our family in Palestine, please come out." Mubarak, who worked closely with Frost in putting together his team of closest advisors and campaign staff, said, "We never pressured him as a Palestine network because we knew he was good on those issues. So when he got the Richie Torres endorsement, I reached out and said, it's time for you to meet with FPN so you're prepared on the issue. And that's when he committed to supporting ending military aid and said he supported BDS. I told him, just don't forget the people who helped build out your campaign. And he was like, of course, and was explicit in supporting the grassroots BDS movement. So isn't that just like a typical story of a politician? Have Palestinians and pro-Palestinian activists help set up your campaign, get you elected, and you're actually good on the issue as well, so they're not concerned, only for you to turn around and screw them over once you actually start running for Congress and once you get elected, saying that, it's a both sides issue, and basically taking the side of the colonizers, Israel, and framing the issue through their lens and saying you don't support BDS anymore, right? So he essentially sold them out, and what's always sad is because Palestinians, especially in America, but generally in the Western world, don't have much of a voice. It doesn't really matter to his power. He just sells them out, right? And of course, there are a lot of leftists like myself who would see that as a red line, like you would never vote for someone who unequivocally supports the Israeli state and demonizes Palestinians in this way. But at the same time, because of the makeup of the Democratic Party, you do get a lot of people who are pro-Zionist who will vote for people like Maxwell Frost. And basically that's what he felt he needed to do to get elected, because it's clear he doesn't actually believe what he's saying. But again, that's disappointing, because as people who come from a generation where hopefully you have better critical thinking skills in terms of the narratives you're fed about the US government or the Israeli government being forces for good or, democracies and stuff, hopefully you'd realize that, this isn't true. And Maxwell Frost appears to have done that. But again, him being Gen Z didn't make him immune to doing the same scummy things all politicians do, basically say anything to get elected and throw people under the bus when it's convenient because you want power and fame. And I saw a video of him at a Paramore concert, up on stage singing with Hayley Williams, and I was just cringing so bad because I'm like, I swear most American politicians don't actually care about helping people. They just care about the status. They care about, this soap opera, which is American politics. That's why sometimes I think they like Republicans being in power, because they can play like this victim or this brave person who constantly calls out the other side, but never has to do anything themselves because they never have significant power. It honestly feels like that at times. And yeah, you can say here is a young guy just on stage at a concert having fun, but also he's never been invited on stage if he isn't a politician / celebrity, which is basically the same thing in the context of the United States. So yeah, while he supports a lot of good things, it's clear he threw Palestinians under the bus, including ones who worked for his campaign, just to get into power and stay in power and not have the force of AIPAC come against him and ruin his campaign like they destroyed Nina Turner's chances of winning as well. So across the Atlantic, we have another Gen Z politician who was elected recently. Funnily enough, he's got the same first name as our lovely right-wing, pro-Israeli apartheid supporting leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer. So Keith Maffer is another person, Gen Z politician, recently elected, 25. Just went on his page on Oxford University because he went there. So after completing a BA in History and Politics at the University of Oxford, Keir spent a year as a parliamentary researcher for UK Member of Parliament Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting is like literally one of the worst politicians in Parliament, like so cynically power hungry, very happy to crap on socialists all day. Him working for Wes Streeting, going to Oxford, I think also raises loads of red flags anyway, but we're going to talk about that a bit later. So although initially concerned that he might not have enough experience to apply, discovering the Political Leadership Scholarship, which is open to applicants from the UK and Ireland who intend to run for public office, cemented his decision. After graduating from the MPP, Keir hopes to return to his home city to get back involved in local politics with the aspiration to run for political office. And something I haven't really talked about, like this guy knew he wanted to be an MP from like 22 years old, and he even did a program which helps you run for political office, right? A program, I think, at Oxford University about running for political office. You've already worked for Wes Streeting, obviously conditioned to be like a massive neoliberal right-winger who will be in lockstep with the Blairite faction of the Labour Party, right? So again, being Gen Z doesn't matter. And even to crave power sometimes, I think you got to be a bit of a psycho. Because it seems like with this guy, it's not born out of concern for people. It's born out of career. This guy out of all of them is the biggest careerist. In America, sometimes it's more about the celebrity, not so much you want a career in politics. This guy wants the career. That's why he works for someone like Wes Streeting, a careerist as well. That's why he's going to be voting in lockstep with the Blairites, because he wants a long career in politics. And someone probably who had delusions of grandeur, like a lot of young people do. And this was funny. So after winning by more than 4,000 votes, Maffer said his first priority would be setting up financial support centres in his constituency for people to get expert help with mortgage payments and energy bills, okay? He also told journalists that he supported Labour leader Keir Starmer's controversial policy of capping the two-child benefit cap, a move which has sparked fury from some backbenchers, saying, "I think we're going to inherit an absolute economic mess from the Conservatives when we take power, and we're going to have to make extremely difficult decisions once we do. And I support the Labour government in doing that." Already sounding like a decades-long seasoned politician there. Now, this policy earned Keith Starmer the nickname Kid Starver, because basically what it means is that you will not get child benefit after your second child if they're born after like 2017 or something, right? So basically the most poor people who rely on these benefits for feeding kids, essentially, and giving the kids a home, they won't get them anymore. And this 25-year-old guy supports that. So it puts a nail in the coffin that Gen Z are going to be any better than millennials or boomers or Gen X or whatever. They're going to be the same. And that says so much about the system generally, because to be in the system, you have to act like everyone else in the system, or you will be outcast by that system, like Jeremy Corbyn. Now, a funny little bonus to this guy is that he appears to have lied that he went to private school as well. So, Evolve Politics, I remember this drama on Twitter. So, new Labour MP Keir Maffer's comms team has been desperately trying to hide his private school education. Several sources told us that while studying at Oxford, he'd previously worked as a researcher for the former Tory MP and Times journalist Matthew Parris. So our new great Gen Z MP went to Oxford University, which is fine, but also worked for Wes Streeting, isn't fine, took a whole like scholarship on how to be an MP basically, worked for a former Tory MP and Times journalist, and went to private school and then started lying about it, right? Seems to me this Gen Z new politician is just as slimy as all the others, right? Because in the UK, our politicians are literally made, carved out of the walls of Eton and Oxbridge, and then put into the House of Commons to continue neoliberalism and the British status quo. And it just shows you that it doesn't really matter what age people are when they go into Congress. Because although each generation has differences of views on stuff, Jeremy Corbyn is like 50 years older than this guy and is far more left-wing and progressive, right? It doesn't seem to really matter when you're indoctrinated by the neoliberal establishment like old Keir here, and he's not going to make a difference to anyone's life. He's not going to improve anyone's life. He's going to do the photo ops in his own county. He's going to do all these like little stupid events you have to do as an MP. But when it comes down to it, he's going to vote for austerity. He's going to vote for whatever Keir Starmer does because he wants a career in politics, right? So I don't really have a theory of why a lot of these Gen Z politicians are so terrible, right? Because I could go on a rant like, oh, Gen Z only care about X, Y, and Z. But I actually, like I was referring to earlier, I think it's a lot more simple. I just think the system fundamentally makes people act like this to become a part of the system, right? Because like I said, I'm someone, communist, who wants to fundamentally change society for the better. I want everyone to have a good standard of living. I want everyone to have freedom from wage slavery, have freedom from a boot on their neck, whether that be from their landlord or their boss or their government, right? I want this freedom, but I do not see that achieved by the parliamentary system we have in the UK. And also the UK parliamentary system wouldn't even let me become an MP. Because the thing is, I don't want to become an MP, but I think I'd be a good MP as well. Because fundamentally, I want to do things that are right for the people. I want to do things that are right for workers. I want to stand up to capitalism, imperialism, and the injustices of British society. Therefore, I wouldn't be allowed to be an MP because I'd be destroyed by basically all the parties where I'd have a chance at winning the seat. Like, sure, maybe I could run for the Green Party, but never get a chance at winning. Could I run for the Labour Party as an open communist and in a seat that's perfectly winnable for the Labour Party? Never. They'd never let me. And even if I did get the nomination to be a Labour MP in a seat where I could actually win, I'd be destroyed by the press immediately. Because the establishment doesn't want anything to change. So you've got to act like someone like old Keir Mather here, or Maxwell Frost, or even this Isaiah Martin guy. You have to become the establishment to get in. Sometimes we have an upset. Sometimes we have a Bernie Sanders. Sometimes we have an AOC winning her primary against Joe Crowley, which was a massive upset, right? Someone who was very progressive winning. But even then, I would say AOC's impact has been neutered because she's become part of the Democratic establishment. She started her congressional career by doing like sit-ins in Nancy Pelosi's office, but nowadays the Democrats are basically all rallied around Joe Biden. Like, she endorsed him without a second thought. Didn't even need any concessions. Just like, yeah, I support Joe Biden for re-election, right? And most of us in AOC's position, we wouldn't do that if you're on the left, because you'd feel like even if you're going to eventually tell people that they should vote for Joe Biden over the Republicans, right? Which most people would probably say they should do if it comes down to that. You wouldn't want to give him the endorsement without any caveats. But it seems that's what she's done, because now AOC, despite being a good progressive, is more part of the establishment than other people. And the only two notable people I see who are a bit of pariahs on the Democratic side are Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, but that's just mainly because they're against Israel. And that says so much because they don't play ball with Israel at all. And while AOC will say certain things, she'll be the one to be present on Iron Dome. While Bowman will say things, but then he'll vote for Iron Dome, right? They all play ball in this dirty political game. And I was actually reading some reports lately is that progressives in Congress now, they don't even coordinate strategies. They like barely talk to each other, right? Because they all just become part of this massive blob of politics, and they all are complicit in their own ways in upholding the neoliberal status quo, because anyone who is a threat to that system gets destroyed. And the biggest evidence you see is the 2019 election in the UK with Jeremy Corbyn and the 2020 primary of Bernie Sanders, where he was winning and then everyone dropped out to endorse Joe Biden. So it became a two-horse race where Joe Biden could win. People don't remember, Joe Biden was coming like sixth at one point. He was doing terribly. It was Pete, Bernie, Elizabeth Warren, I think even Kamala Harris was above Joe Biden. And at every debate, he was terrible. But then obviously he got on the phone with Obama. Obama got on the phone with Cory Booker, Mayor Pete. They all dropped out and endorsed Biden. Because the system does not want people like Bernie Sanders, even though I firmly believe someone like Bernie Sanders isn't going to significantly change the beast that is the US capitalist war machine. at the very least, they're still threatened by the possibility he could pass stuff that severely limits their power through executive action or maybe a progressive bit of legislation. So yeah, that is probably why Gen Z politicians will be good in some ways, but that's probably why most of them will be trash. Because of many reasons. You want to be a careerist, you want to be a celebrity, you're an absolute psycho who craves power and would probably be a policeman if you couldn't be a politician. And it's just depressing because I feel like more people from my generation, Gen Z, whatever, we should be more radicalized where the default should be something that is more anti-status quo. But like I said, for a variety of factors, that is not the case. But anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.